If you have attended a leadership offsite or leadership development program in the last 15 years, you've probably seen the video, or it possibly has shown up in your social feed over that same time horizon. In the video, 6 people stand in a room passing basketballs back and forth. 3 are wearing white shirts, 3 are wearing black shirts. The assignment is simple. Count how many times the players in white pass the ball. The video begins, and you focus intently on the task. Most people do quite well. They stay focused and count carefully. They complete the assignment, just as the rules state. Then the facilitator asks a simple question. Did anyone see the gorilla? Confused faces fill the room. The video is replayed. Halfway through the exercise, a person wearing a gorilla suit walks directly through the middle of the screen, pauses, does a little dance, beats their chest, and walks away. And somehow, most people never noticed. The experiment became famous because it demonstrates what psychologists call selective attention. When our attention becomes occupied by one thing, we often fail to notice something else, even when it is directly in front of us. The lesson is not that people are inattentive. The lesson is that our attention is limited. I've been reflecting and wondering if the last year has felt a lot like that. We are all so focused on counting the passes that we are missing the gorilla in the scene. But before we go any further, let me take a minute to introduce myself if you are new here. My name is Chris Schmelzer, and I serve leaders who recognize the need and understand that the old models of leading and working are no longer keeping up with the pace of change. Every week, I track the subtle signals that a massive reset is coming for what we refer to as white-collar work, and share thoughts on how to lead yourself and your organization through the age of accelerating change. If you find any value in this video, like it, share your comments below, and subscribe. A year ago, I started writing this newsletter because at the time, I found myself in conversations with very intelligent leaders who were debating whether artificial intelligence would meaningfully change work. Some thought the technology was overhyped. Others believed meaningful disruption was still years into the future. At the same time, I was spending my evenings reading books on the topic, watching interviews from people building the technology, researching the companies investing billions into it, tracking the announcements coming from the frontier labs, and immersing myself in the technology itself. The gap between the conversations I was having and what I was experiencing and learning felt enormous. The conversation I was having with leaders was debating whether AI mattered. The information I was consuming was debating how quickly it would reshape society. That gap frustrated me. Not because I believed I knew exactly what was going to happen. I didn't, still don't, and more than anything have learned that predicting the future is impossible. But because it felt like many people were counting passes, while something much larger was moving through the frame. So I continued to pay attention. And I thought I would document and share what I was reading, watching, and trying to make sense of. Every week. For the last year, I've followed the same process. This week, Mo Gaudat appeared on the Diary of a CEO podcast and gave language to something I have been observing now for months. He calls it the Hype Dichotomy. Simply put, a dichotomy is a gap between two competing realities. In this case, the gap between what many people closest to AI believe is happening and what much of the general public believes is happening. On one side are people who believe AI is mostly hype. The headlines are exaggerated and the predictions are inflated. Ultimately, most of us are either ignoring the warnings or telling ourselves they are overblown. But on the other side are many of the experts, those who are closest to the machines, the ones who have been building these systems for the last decade, those who increasingly believe the public is dramatically underestimating the magnitude of the change. What struck me most about Mo's comments was not that he was predicting the future. It was that he was describing a pattern I have seen repeatedly over the last 12 months. Jeffrey Hinton, Dario Amodei, Sam Altman, Demis Hassabis, Jack Dorsey, Peter Diamandis, Mo Gaudat. These experts don't agree. But there is one thing they seem remarkably aligned on. Something significant is happening. Not eventually, but right now. And that observation becomes difficult to ignore when you spend a year following the signals. Over the last 12 months, we have read headlines about companies' attempts to restructure around AI. We have seen frontier models develop capabilities that seemed impossible only a couple years ago. We have watched governments begin debating regulation. Schools and universities question how education should adapt. Entire categories of software showing vulnerabilities to this emergence. Last week, I wrote about the Pope's 40,000-word encyclical on artificial intelligence. The reason I found it so interesting has very little to do with whether I agree or disagree with his conclusions. It is because institutions like the Catholic Church rarely respond to technological trends. They respond to civilization-level shifts. When the leader of 1.4 billion Catholics feels compelled to dedicate one of the highest forms of church teaching to artificial intelligence, that itself is a signal. Not a signal about whether AI will be good or bad, a signal about the magnitude of the change that thoughtful observers believe may be unfolding. And after a year of following these signals, I have become increasingly convinced that the debate about whether AI will fundamentally reshape society is over. The real debate now is how quickly it happens and how prepared we are when it does. There is a famous quote that says, "The future is already here. It is just not evenly distributed." And I think that is exactly what the hype dichotomy is pointing toward. The challenge is that most people don't experience change collectively. They experience it day by day, commute by commute, meeting by meeting, email by email, deadline by deadline. And when life becomes busy, our attention naturally narrows. This may be the most important lesson I have learned from writing this newsletter over the last year. Change arrives in increments smaller than attention. We focus on what is immediately in front of us. The quarterly target, the project plan to get there, the fire drill that throws it off, the family schedule that consumes our evenings and weekends, and the endless stream of notifications competing for our attention. And before long, an entire year has passed. The result is that transformational change often becomes visible only in hindsight. We only see the gorilla once we replay the video. The interesting thing is that I don't think this is fundamentally an AI problem. I think it is an attention problem. And if that is true, then what Mo calls the hype dichotomy starts showing up everywhere. Not just in society or technology, but inside organizations too. Because every transformation leader I know is trying to solve the same challenge. They sense something changing before everyone else does. A changing market, a changing customer, a changing workforce, a changing technology landscape, an emerging operating model. And then they spend the next several years trying to help others see it too. The challenge is rarely that the signal doesn't exist. The challenge is that the people they are trying to influence are focused on something else. And that is exactly what makes transformation so difficult. The people you are trying to influence are focused on this quarter's targets, the customer issue that surfaced yesterday, the project that is already behind schedule, the inbox that never seems to get smaller, the meeting they are late for, the budget they are trying to protect, the team member who just resigned. In other words, they are focused on counting passes, not because they don't care about the future, but because their attention is consumed by the old rules of the game. The transformation leader is trying to direct attention towards something that does not fully exist yet. A workforce being reshaped by artificial intelligence. The challenge is that all of these forces are moving gradually enough to be ignored, yet quickly enough to fundamentally change the conditions under which organizations operate. That is the paradox. The signal is visible, but only if you are paying attention. And attention is becoming increasingly difficult to hold. The challenge in your organization, your team, or your community is that the people you are trying to influence are already overwhelmed. They are not necessarily resistant. They are overloaded. There is an important difference between those two states of being. Most people are not actively rejecting change. They are simply operating at the edge of their cognitive and emotional capacity. And to save the little bandwidth they have left, they feel safer diverting to the old ways of doing something. On top of that, their attention is fragmented because their calendars are full and their notifications never stop going off. Their nervous systems are carrying more information, more uncertainty, and more stimulation than at any point in human history, which means modern transformation has become, in many ways, a battle for attention. And attention may be one of the scarcest resources in the modern organization. This is where I think many organizations misunderstand resistance. The traditional playbook assumes resistance is an information problem. If people understood the change, they would support it. That is the assumption most transformation leaders are operating from. So when it feels like they don't support it, logic suggests to double down on the old playbook and create communication plans, orchestrate town halls, script leaders' messages, design technical training programs, develop FAQ documents to help people find the details in hopes of creating an understanding of the change. And to be clear, sometimes those things are necessary. But what if resistance is often mislabeled? Consider a leader trying to introduce an AI initiative inside an organization. The business case is clear. It is fully backed by the executive team and the technology works. Yet the response from the workforce feels underwhelming. Leaders describe the reaction as resistance. But what if it isn't? What if the same employees have already lived through a restructuring, a software implementation, 3 rounds of cost pressure, a hiring freeze, and continuous uncertainty about what AI means for their role? What if they aren't resisting the future? What if they simply lack the capacity to absorb another change? Research consistently shows that when people become overwhelmed, the brain narrows its focus toward immediate threats and short-term concerns. Curiosity decreases. Cognitive flexibility declines. Long-term thinking becomes harder. We literally become less capable of seeing the broader picture. We overlook the gorilla because we are so focused on following the rules of the game. But the rules of the game are changing. And when you ask people to question those rules, challenge assumptions, or rethink how they work, their nervous systems often interpret that uncertainty as a threat. This is why I continue to believe that one of the defining leadership capabilities of the next decade will not be strategy, communication, or execution. It will be helping people maintain the capacity to engage with change, helping them regulate uncertainty, helping them stay grounded amidst disruption, helping them remain curious when fear would be easier, helping them widen their attention when the world is encouraging them to narrow it. Because people cannot adapt to a future they cannot see, and they cannot see a future they do not have the capacity to process. The challenge facing leaders today is not simply helping people understand change. It is helping them remain regulated enough to notice it, to become aware. Because attention is becoming scarcer and the pace of change is accelerating. We are on a collision course with surprise, which means more and more organizations will discover the gorilla only after it has already walked through the room. The challenge is not getting people to work harder. It is helping them create enough capacity to see what is changing around them. So, what does helping people widen their attention actually look like? In my experience, it often starts with something surprisingly simple. Before asking people to solve a problem, make a decision, or discuss a change, invite them to notice their current state. What are they carrying into the conversation? What pressure are they under? How much capacity do they actually have available? Most organizations rush immediately to the work. We have become very good at measuring progress, milestones, status updates, and deliverables, but we rarely stop to ask a different question. How much capacity is available in the system right now? And by capacity, I don't mean how many hours are available on someone's calendar. I mean cognitive and emotional capacity. I mean the ability to focus and pay attention. Do people have enough bandwidth to think clearly, to challenge assumptions, to hear new information, to engage with uncertainty? That kind of capacity is difficult to measure, but in my experience, it can be expanded. Sometimes simply by slowing down, by helping people arrive before asking them to perform, by grounding people in the current experience instead of immediately pulling them into the next task. In your next leadership meeting, project meeting, or change discussion, try something simple. Before jumping into the agenda, ask everyone to quietly set an intention for what they want to stay focused on during the conversation. What matters most to them in this meeting? What deserves their attention? Then encourage them to periodically check in with themselves and notice whether their attention is still there. It sounds small, but helping people become aware of where their attention may be one of the most practical ways to help them navigate a world where attention is increasingly under attack. Because people cannot pay attention when they are overwhelmed. and they cannot engage with a future they do not have the capacity to process. Whether you are navigating change yourself or leading others through it, pay attention to what has your attention. That may be the first step towards seeing the gorilla before everyone else does. If you want to explore how to lead yourself and your organization through the age of accelerating change, my new book, The Missing Link, offers a new lens. It shows why most change efforts stall and how human capacity, not just strategy, determines success. Once you see it, you'll lead change very differently. You can access it for free right now. Link is below the video.